Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My dear students and dear audience, friends, I'm really very encouraged by the way the earlier lecture on the introduction to the Sustainable Development Goals has been appreciated and received by the audience. While looking at the importance of the topic, we will today discuss the Sustainable Development Goals in a bit details. And then in the next 17 or 18 lectures or maximum 20 lectures, we will try to see that how under each sustainable development goal, the various targets, which are about 169 targets, have been envisaged in this UN plan for 15 years. And then we would try to see that how the universities can play their role in achieving some or all of these goals. We deliberated in detail an introduction to the various goals, and today we will a bit more details of these goals based on the UN reports and UN Sustainable Development Goal targets for the nations of the world. So we could see this symbolic representation of the 17 goals, and if you just look at the background, that on 5th September 2015, almost 193 heads of states of the United Nations General Assembly set up a collection of 17 goals known as the Sustainable Development Goal, or simply global goals. The SDGs and their 169 targets from the core of Resolution 70/1 of the United Nations, which is a breakthrough agreement called Agenda 2030. The goals are to be achieved by all member states of the year by the year 2030. They are universal call to action to end the poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity. The goals are broad, interdependent, and cover social, economic, and social issues, and making them work in everyone's responsibility. Now we will give a brief overview. But when we look at the Code 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, we can figure out that these SDGs have been placed under 5 P's. We call the people, the prosperity, the peace, partnership, and planet. Within the people perspective, we are normally looking for end of poverty and hunger, and then ensure dignity and quality through education, through economic empowerment, to reducing the inequalities, to mainstream the genders and the females particularly, and so on. The second very important P is prosperity, that the premium of the development should also reach the most underprivileged part of the society, and that would ensure that prosperous and fulfilling lives in harmony with the nature. And then peace, which is really very important for a sustainable world, that we have to foster the peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. And the other P is partnership, that we would need to implement the agenda of the Sustainable Development Goal at SDG 2030 through a solid and global partnership. And then the planet Earth, which is the natural resources and climate for future generations. So we have to protect the natural resources and climate for the future generations. Now, when we look at the background, that everybody is needed for translating these sustainable development goals into reality. And it's not only the government responsibility, every person, even a little thing can make some impact. The second is global goals will change the way of the world does business. So there will be a transformative process through which the life in the world and the distribution of resources and the use of resources will be uh, optimized. The global goals are one for all and all for one. So no goal is more important than the other. So all the goals are certainly important for one another. The goals will address climate change. The global goals will address. So one of the biggest issue we discussed last time that the climate change and these issues will certainly address the one of the very detrimental and dangerous or disastrous climate change which is happening in this Earth planet, and we could see a lot of repercussions. Then we also believe that this will eradicate the extreme poverty, and we will discuss what we mean by the extreme poverty. So this will, there's a great achievement, but it's not enough. The global goals aim to end poverty in its all forms and everywhere by 2030. The global goals will leave no one behind. So this will try to enable and empower the people and reduce the inequalities. The global goals are hands-on. They contain concrete plans on how to change the world and how to pay for it and how to make sure that everybody's on board. So these 169 targets are trying to make the people aware of their role in the realization process of these goals. The global goals are global. It's not for only one country, rather the entire world has to be achieving these goals. And then they are people's goal. They are more focused on the sustainable development of people. And then these goals are world's ultimate to do less for the next 15 years. So almost half of, we are now almost halfway. Something like 6 years have been passed now. And we have another 9 years to go till the 2030, or maybe 8 years or 9 years, in which we can then realize and see and analyze that whether these goals have been met or not. We discussed the premium goal, and that is to end the poverty in all its forms and manifestations. And we normally define as per UN that an income of 1.25 US dollars per day. If it is less than this, then people are treated to be poor. And there is a great majority of people in the developing countries who are still living below the line of poverty. The target for this goal includes the world where the poor are not vulnerable to climate change and have equal rights to economic resources. Economic growth must be inclusive to provide sustainable jobs and promote quality. The goal aims to eradicate extreme poverty. So unfortunately, even in Pakistan and other developing countries, we can see that we still have a very low income, and people are earning sometimes less than a $1.25 per day. The second goal is to end hunger and to provide the food security to the human being and to improve their nutrition and to promote the sustainable agriculture. Now, this is very unfortunate that in the developing countries, there are problems of malnutrition and the people are not getting the required quality of food. And this normally leads to a very common problem of wasted and stunted growths. And people are, their body mass index is very low, and they have a very thin frame bodies, and they have a very short height. And this is normally very common in the north of Pakistan, and we believe that almost 40% of the people who are living in the mountain areas are malnutrition, and the children have the wasted and stunted growth. And this is unfortunately more prevalent in the rural areas where the quality of food is relatively not much better in terms of nutritional value. And that would definitely bring the various problems with the children, like they have short height, they have very thin frame of bodies, and they are also vulnerable to different kind of diseases. So this would, the ending of hunger would mean that, unfortunately, still people suffer from hunger in the South Africa and the Asia, Southeast Asia, in some countries where the poverty is very low. The people are still not having the food twice a day. The minimum requirement of food is not there. And this definitely bring a lot of malnutrition around the world, and mostly women and children. So the food and agriculture sector offers key solution for development and central for the hunger and poverty. And this would certainly need to create the food security. So target for this goal include ending malnutrition, protecting small farmers, protecting the genetic diversity of crops produced, and investing in research to make farming more productive. And this is where the university would play their very active role. And we will discuss under this particular SDG that how the university can play their role in ending the poverty and ending the food insecurity. The third most important part is then to have to ensure that the people are living healthily, and their health and well-being is ensured for all ages. And again, unfortunately, there are since we have the poverty in the developing country, we have the hunger and the food insecurity, and this altogether would lead to a very low health index, and the people well-being and health is always challenged. And we can see that we have a lot of diseases which are very prevailing in these areas. We have the cancers, we have the asthma, we have the tuberculosis, and we have the HIV, AIDS, and all these infections. So to ensure the health and well-being security, we would need to promote the well-being for all at all ages, and this is essential for the sustainable development. And these goals may include the call for universal health coverage, increasing the healthcare workforce, reducing illness and death by pollution, comprehensive agenda for tackling a wide range of global health challenges such as AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis, and certainly we have now the pandemics like COVID-19. So this is now becoming a very biggest global challenge, that how the people would be vaccinated to protect the people and the public health. And this is really becoming a great challenge now for the people and for the world. The fourth is really important, is to ensure that the quality education is provided to all, and this is not only for the youth or for the children, but at the same time we need to bring a culture of lifelong learning, and this would require that all the people are learning at all ages. And this is a quality education which is the foundation improving the people's lives in sustainable development. And the targets for this goal include the need for access to university level education, vocational training, and entrepreneurial skills, and to help the children in the community to read. And we also need to have the continuing education processes in all the important professional fields. The fifth is then to ensure that there is a gender equality and the gender mainstreaming, and we involve the women in the, empower the women and girls through education, through entrepreneurial development, and through their economic empowerment and decision-making process must have a very good involvement of the females. So this will certainly include the people. The gender equality is not only a fundamental human rights, but it's also a necessary foundation for the peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable world. In one of our latest research on the rural water supply schemes under the WASEP, Water Sanitation Extension Program of the Aga Khan Habitat Agency for Habitat, we could see that the real success of these rural water supply schemes was the involvement of the females in the development and design process, And this really brought a very high level of ownership in the community. And we could see that even these projects are still very successfully functioning after 15 to 20 years in some cases. So if we really want to involve the females in the decision making, in the project designs, in the project implementation, we really create a peaceful and prosperous and sustainable world for us. And then the female are not only owning these assets, but also protecting it. Then we have the targets for the goals, which include the freedom from discrimination, violence, ensuring equal share of leadership, opportunities, and responsibility for women, as well as property ownership. And this is really very important if we really want to create an inclusive society, which is peaceful, tolerant, and pluralistic. We have to encourage the involvement of female in the decision making and create their ownership. Several references are made to national appropriateness in interpreting these targets. For example, the call out sexist language and behavior. This is really very important. And it's very important to mention here that we have a Anti-Sexual Harassment Act 2010, which has been implemented in the universities also. And there is a stringent deployment of the committees and the SOPs and the rules through which we are trying to discourage the sexist language use, the harassment of females, and even the sexual harassment, which is really very important in the workplaces to curb. So the gender equality and providing also the opportunities for those transgenders, which is really very important now, because the world has been creating now awareness towards the rights of the transgenders in the employment, education, and mainstreaming. And at the same time, we also need to take care of the people with the different abilities, or special people, because they are also part of the global citizenship, and we need to take care of their needs. The sixth, I discussed this last time, that even today, 1/4 of the global population is not having access to the clean drinkable water, and at the same time, sanitation. Almost 2 billion people around the world are still not having the access to the properly designed and implemented sanitation system. And this is really bringing a lot of diseases like hepatitis and the typhoid, and sometimes the waterborne diseases. So the SDG 6 is really very important to ensure that the clean water and sanitation is reaching to all parts of the world. And even the most vulnerable communities should have a clean tap water, and they should have some minimum level of the sanitation. So this would require that there is a clean and accessible water for all. It's is an essential part of the world we want to live in. And the water scarcity, which is affecting almost 40% of the total global population, is really now becoming a challenge in even in the developing and developed countries both. So targets for this goal include programs that provide access to the basic technologies like toilets or latrines, as well as protecting the ecosystem that provide water, avoid wasting water. And there is a large number of challenges now in the water quality and quantity, and the current glacial melting process and the climate change is having a lot of impacts on the water quality and availability. And this is an area of high concern, and we, the scientists and the water managers and the policy makers, really want to play their role in conserving the water resources and managing the water resources, because in most part of the world, it's not only mainly the problem of availability of water. This is more like a management issue in which the water management is not being done very intelligently, and we need to take care for this. The seventh goal, which is again very important, is to ensure the access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy, which is clean and which is reliable both. And this would certainly need to discourage the fossil fuels and the thermal power generation from the coal and petroleum and the gasoline sources. So energy is central to the nearly every major challenge and opportunity, and about 1.3 billion people globally have no access to electricity. This is again a very concerning point, because it's again 20% of the people around the world are not having access to the electricity, even for lighting a single bulb or light, which is really very pathetic in some cases. In places like Gilgit-Baltistan, in the remote areas, in winters, we have severe outages of powers for sometimes for 20 hours in 24 hours, which seriously affect the life activities of the people in majority. So the targets for this goal emphasize on conversion of renewable resources and a dramatic improvement in the efficiency anywhere, and use only energy efficient light bulbs or appliances. We have the LEDs now, and which are very efficient. And again, the opportunities and the potentials of the renewable energy in the north of Pakistan provides a lot of energy potentials which need to be tapped through the modern techniques and technologies. And this is really very encouraging that the world is now putting their huge, and the present government also is very careful and very much focused on developing the renewable energy in the northern potential of the Gilgit-Baltistan. The eighth very important goal is to promote economic growth and employment and decent work for all. This again is related to the economic empowerment of the citizens of the world, and we need to increase their capacities through entrepreneurial mindset and design, so that the students and the graduates can have the better life through economic empowerment. So the sustainable economic growth will require societies to create the conditions that allow people to have quality jobs. About 75 million people between the age of 15 and 24 are estimated to be unemployed. And let me tell you that this figure is almost 100 million plus now, because due to COVID-19, we have a lot of challenges. And one of the biggest challenges we had is to the many people have been rendered unemployed in some of the sectors like aviation, tourism and hospitality, education, hoteling, and many others, adventure tourism, the oil sector, the transport sector has got a very big burnt of this COVID-19. So collectively, this figure of 75 million is going to be doubled now, it's about 150 million. And we can expect that this would continue because the COVID-19 is still going on, and we can expect that this would continue for another 1 year. And that would bring more problems for the people who are already unemployed or underemployed. So the goals of this target is to closing the gap between the using innovation as well as separating growth from the ecosystem degradation, buy from green companies. So buying from the green companies which are respecting the sustainable development goals. Now the ninth is related to the resilient infrastructure and sustainable growth, and promote and foster the resilient industrial growth. And this would certainly require the investment in infrastructure which are crucial to achieve the sustainable goals and development, and we would need to bring the green and clean processing and industries. Targets for the this goal include fostering a more innovative and environmentally sound approach to industrial development. So we need to use the more and more green sources for the industrial development, and we will try to see that how more innovative products and services can be provided to the industrial modern industries. The 10th sustainable development goal is to reduce the inequalities amongst the countries and individuals, and this is again for the human and world development, that we have to reduce the gap between the have and have-nots within the country and within the world, as we see that the people are sometimes very poor, but on the other hand, we see that not more than 10% of the elitist class of the world is having all these resources. So this would certainly try to see that how can we reduce this massive inequality in the world. And this is to reduce the inequalities. Policies should be universal in principle, paying attention to the needs of disadvantaged and marginalized populations around the world. And target for this goal include financial markets, regulation to make the playing field more equal, competitive, and making migration more orderly, safe, regular, and responsible. And we have to raise our voice against the financial discriminations. The 11th, very important, is to make the cities more sustainable through the inclusive and resilient development, sustainable development. And we discussed this last time that the cities are deteriorating because of the urbanization, the urban sprawl, and we are looking at the world becoming more and more polluted. So this would require that we should save the cities to make them more resilient and sustainable. And some of the actions we would need is to include that provide opportunities for all with access to basic services, energy, housing, transportation, and jobs. And then more than half of the world population is currently living in the cities, and this would increase maybe in the next 15 years. We can expect that this would reach to 60 or 70%. So target for this goal may include the addressing the issues like transportation, disaster preparedness in the urban disaster preparedness, as well as the preservation of the world's culture and natural heritage. We have some unique places in the cities which are heritage of the world heritage, and we need to protect them. In Pakistan, having a good number of the natural heritage in the books which have been declared as listed a cultural and natural heritage, and bike, walk, and use of public transportation to keep the cities more cleaner. And instead of high reliance on the fossil fuels and transport, we have to bring the mass transit transport in the cities. The 12th is to ensure that there is sustainable consumption and production at individual and collective level. And we need to believe in the sustainability of the material and resources through better consumption habits. And at the same time, we would try to see that how the consumption and production patterns are more and more sustainable. So some of the very important goals include the topics like reducing the food wastages, corporate sustainability practice, and we call it sometimes the green organizations, where the sustainability is more promoted in the different operations. And there are important factors like lifestyle choices of the people, the simplicity, and it's one of the best way to live, to recycle the paper, glass, plastic, and other metals. The 13 very important goal is then to take the climate action, and we discussed last time that there is a serious retreat in the glacial mass in the Himalaya, Karakoram, and Hindu Kush region, and HKH region, Hindu Kush, Karakoram, and Himalayan region. And we could see that a large number of new glacial lakes have been formed due to increase in temperature at the high altitude. So this is not only creating the flooding in the downstream area, but at the same time, there are high chances of the glacial lake outburst floods. And this can be really very disastrous. And we could see in the north of Pakistan that in some cases, this has been creating a lot of damages to the livelihood of people and to the infrastructure and to the facilities which have been developed for the community. We recently visited a couple of valleys in the Gilgit-Baltistan, and we could visit that how the livelihood, the orchards, and the agricultural land has been devastated with these floods. And this would certainly require very important actions to be taken by the communities, by the governments, by the society, the academia. At the moment, there is a very huge project going on that is called GLOV2 under the UNDP, and this is funded by the Global Climate Fund. And this fund is mainly addressing in many ways to forecast the disasters, and at the same time taking the assessment of different kind of vulnerabilities, and then making the people aware of these challenges, and at the same time developing their capacities, that how can they be then addressing such kind of disasters in case it is happening in any future date. To reduce the impacts of climate, we need to understand that the climate change is now a global phenomenon, and it is unfortunately the countries like Pakistan, who has not been very bigger partner in creating the global greenhouses gases and the global warming, but unfortunately its impact in terms of climate change is very high for Pakistan and for the north of Pakistan. So this goal has been aesthetic, is it references to the Paris Agreement of December 2015, which guides nations to jointly commit to limiting the global warming to not more than 2 degrees Celsius. This is very unfortunate that even if at a 2 degrees Celsius, we will be not having the Western Himalayas glaciers, because it is an estimate that in the current century, we have an increase in temperature by 0.87 degrees Celsius to 1 degree Celsius. But certainly if it is going to another 2-degree increase, we will have a lot of melting of the glaciers at low altitude. And that would create a lot of challenges for the water resources and a lot of challenges for the community around these glaciers. There might be high flooding in the next century, and we can then understand that in the long run, there can be severe shortage of water in the downstream ends. So we will like to educate the people on climate change and put them on a sustainable pathway. And as we discussed that we are currently working with the Gilgit-Baltistan government through the P&D department under the GLAF 2 project, and we are trying to see that how can we educate the people, create their awareness and capacity building, and then we provide them some kind of expertise so that they can plan their projects and they can then design their different livelihood and their assets in a way which are safe from these disasters due to climate change. And certainly we cannot reverse the process, but we can slow down and mitigate the process of this climate change. And that is what we call is climate adaptation. One of the biggest challenge we could see in the Gilgit-Baltistan due to climate change has been the severe impact on agriculture productivity. And one of our studies, we could see that agriculture productivity of the major crops of the north have been reduced due to change in the pattern of weathers. Which is generally called the climate change. So certainly we need to then think about the climate adaptive agriculture also, which can be resilient to these changes. We can anticipate in the north of the country. The 14th Sustainable Development Goal is, we discussed this last time, the life under the sea, and to conserve and sustainably use the ocean, seas, and marine resources. And this then definitely calls for a careful management of the essential global resources like aquatic life and sustainable future. The world's oceans are overfished, underprotected, and stressed from climate change and pollution. This is really one of the biggest challenge for us also in the north, that people are fishing and the density of the fishes are decreasing. At the same time, there are a lot of diseases which are due to the metal incidents in the fish and the marine life. So the target for this goal include research and learning to find out more about what lies beneath the ocean so as to better serve them, and avoid plastic bags to keep the ocean safe and clean. And this is where the high level of pollution is created in the ocean when we are using different kinds of polythene bags in our life, because ultimately they are then going to the oceans. The 15th very important goal is to then the life on the surface of Earth, and that is to sustainably manage the forest, combat the desertification, halt and reverse the land degradation, and halt the biodiversity loss. Now, these 4 things are all really very important, because you see that the forest covered in Pakistan and in the world is decreasing, and due to the deforestation and to the erosion due to the floods, the forest cover has been substantially increasing in the last few decades. and this would require certainly a very careful management. The billion tree policy of the present government is really very important, but we certainly would need to see that all the universities and the people and different institutions are involved, and there is a very strong response from the forest department to provide them the different kind of facilities. The desertification is another issue that due to the climatic changes, we have the lesser rainfall in the areas where we had a sizable rainfall, and this is reducing the yield of the soil, and the land is becoming more and more deserted. Similarly, we have to reverse the land degradation. There are a lot of issues with the land. For example, the effluents which are discharged into the land, and then the use of chemical fertilizers, the pesticides, and all these are creating a lot of issues for the land degradation. And finally, the biodiversity loss is really another challenge, that we have a lot of endangered species now, and some of them are already becoming rarer and endangered, and these endangered species are then seriously disbalancing the biodiversity chain, and we need to retain this biodiversity, otherwise the world would be not be able to cope with this challenge. So some of the targets or the goals we have that we need to halting the threat to the living ecosystem and biodiversity on land, and plant a tree and help to protect the environment. This is what the present government has been also emphasizing, and we have to see that how the Gilgit-Baltistan government can partner with the other stakeholder in university and education institutions to bring the environmental sustainability through green and afforestation. Last but not the least, and the most important, is the partnership. That if you really want to achieve these goals, we have to revitalize the global, national, regional partnerships for the sustainable development, and that would require, the 16 is to have the, there has been some problem with this slide. The 16 is the peace. We missed this one. That they promote the peaceful coexistence and inclusive society, and then sustainable development, so that access to of justice to all the people, the merit and transparency of rules and laws. And the targets for this goal include the reduction of violence, the gender discrimination, the end of torture, reduction of corruption, as well as creation of institution and government that works for everyone. So we need to improve the accountability system, both in the institutional level and the global and national level, and at the same time use your right to elect the leaders in your country and local community. And this will require the local bodies empowerment also at the local level, and then the provincial and national level. Then we discussed the last one a bit earlier, and that was the global partnership. And this global partnership would call for every country, every person should be partnered in realizing these goals, sustainable development goals. And this goal targets ensuring the countries have what is needed in achieving the rest of the SDGs, such as funds, capacities, and technologies. And for this, certainly, we would need to have a very good partnership. The global emphasis that need for partnership and collaboration is really very important. And when we talk about the universities, we have to have a south to south partnership and north to south partnership, because then southeast partnership, which is really very important for the achieving of these goals. So I think the more important is that this, we discussed this also in the beginning, that each goal is important, and we cannot say give more importance or less importance to the other goal. So all are equally important, and all the nations of the world have to be careful to achieve these goals. Then the second is that they are all connected. It's not only important, but they are connected. For instance, if we end poverty, it would bring empowerment. If we try to see that the food security is ensured. It will improve the health and well-being. So all these sustainable development goals are related to one another, and they are connected to one another. So certainly improvement of the one goal would, or achieving of the one goal would bring a sustainability of the other goal also. And that is how the interconnectivity of these goals are really very important. So my students, ladies and gentlemen, audience, thank you very much for the today lecture, and we will try to see that how can we then bring more and more understanding of the of these goals and targets, and certainly try to see that how the global partnership and the universities can achieve these goals.